My phone buzzed while I was pinning a borrowed hood over a rented black gown, and for one stupid second, I smiled. I thought it was my father saying they were downstairs. I thought it was a photo from Logan. I thought it was the message I had been waiting on all morning. The one that would make the knot in my throat look dramatic instead of prophetic. Instead, it was my mother. We can explain later. Your sister really needs us today. I read it once, then again. The hotel room went so quiet I could hear the mini fridge clicking on beneath the desk. Outside the window, Cambridge was already moving toward commencement. Bright dresses, dark suits, parents carrying flowers too big for the sidewalks. And I was standing there in MIT regalia, one sleeve half twisted, staring at a sentence so gentle it almost looked polite. That was the worst part at first. Not panic, not even anger, just the softness of it. I was in a hotel near Kendall Square that smelled faintly like carpet cleaner and espresso from the lobby machine downstairs. The gown had sharp rental creases across the chest. My hood was folded on the bed beside a printed itinerary I had made for my parents in color-coded blocks. Hotel check-in, breakfast, hooting ceremony, photos at Killian, dinner by the Charles. I had put walking times between each location because my father likes knowing where to stand before he gets anywhere. I had even added little notes in the margins. Good photo spot here. Family seating opens early. Bring light jacket for the river. The family group chat sat above my mother's text like evidence from a different universe. Dad, boarding now. Mom, send us weather there. Me, sunny and windy, bring the navy coat. Sister, don't make them dress like Professors Lowell. Dad, we land at 8:40. Proud of you, kid. That had been yesterday. After that, nothing. I told myself all morning that airports were chaotic, that they were older now, that connections slipped. Phones died, people forgot to update. I had built a whole defense case for them before breakfast. By 9, I was checking the arrivals board from my phone like I worked for the airline. By 10, I had called twice and hung up before the ringtone finished, as if I could preserve everyone's dignity by not making them say the thing out loud. Then my mother did say it out loud. Not directly, of course not. Your sister really needs us today. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my knees suddenly felt unreliable. The fabric of the gown made that dry, papery sound under me. On the nightstand was the paper wristband from rehearsal, a campus map, and my MIT ID with the blue lanyard I had worn for years. Through late nights and badge swipes and rooms full of equipment worth more than my family's house. I picked up the phone again and typed, "What happened?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. I waited. Nothing. I typed, "Are you still coming after?" Deleted it. Then, "Are you at the airport?" Deleted that too. I knew the choreography, asked too directly, and the problem becomes my tone. Sound hurt too early, and suddenly everyone is managing my reaction instead of their choice. So I stared at the screen like there might be another version of the message hidden underneath the first one. An emergency, a hospital, a car wreck, some disaster that would let me keep loving them cleanly for 1 more hour. But there was something in the wording I recognized. We can explain later. It was the family phrase for a decision already made. My phone lit again. Not from them. My lab friend Mina, lobby in 20, I'm bringing safety pins and coffee. Also breathe, I almost laughed. Mina had spent the last week treating my graduation like a moon landing. She had backup tissues, backup bobby pins, backup plans for rain. She knew my committee members by face and my advisor's terrible timing by reputation. She had texted me at midnight, "Sleep or I'm coming up there." I wrote back, "Yeah, see you soon." Then I opened Instagram because pain makes people do ridiculous things. One story ring glowed at the top with my sister's username. I knew I should not click it. I clicked it anyway. The first clip showed their backyard at home, not our old rusted picnic table backyard. Transformed backyard. White cocktail tables with fitted covers. A rented bar with stacked silver cans. A ring light already set up beside a hedge. Streamers in metallic orange and lime moving in the wind. Someone had hung a banner between 2 poles that read launch day in block letters, above a logo I had seen once in a family chat and dismissed as temporary. The second clip panned across catered trays under plastic domes. Sliders, fruit skewers, tiny plastic cups with what looked like chili lime rims. My sister's voice came from behind the camera, laughing. "If the investor actually comes early, we're ready." The third clip landed on my mother. She was holding a roll of tape in her teeth and smoothing one corner of the banner with both hands. Not dressed for travel, not in an airport, not delayed home. I watched that one twice because my brain needed repetition to cooperate with reality. Her hair was clipped up the way she wore it when she was busy in the kitchen. My father crossed briefly through the frame carrying folding chairs. He looked exactly like he looked every time there was a church picnic or birthday or reunion that somehow required his full practical devotion. Focused, useful, present. My chest tightened so hard I had to stand up again. There are humiliations you can hide inside. This one was visual. Documented, streamed in vertical video with the tropical music filter over it. My parents were not missing my MIT PhD hooting because something terrible happened. They were helping decorate a backyard launch party for my sister's boyfriend's canned cocktail startup. I said that sentence out loud to the empty room just to hear how insane it sounded. No one answered. My mother finally sent another text. Please don't do this today. That was when my face got hot. Not because she had canceled, because she had skipped past the part where I got to react. We had somehow leaped over explanation, over apology, over simple adult honesty, and arrived at management. Containment? Don't do this today. As if the danger wasn't what they had done. As if the threat was me noticing. I called her. She declined on the second ring. A second later, she texted, "Can't talk, busy here, busy here." In the hallway outside, I heard another family passing my door. A mother saying, "Did you pack the flowers?" A man laughing. Someone knocking on the wrong room and apologizing. The ordinary noise of people showing up. I looked at the 2 extra commencement tickets on the desk. I had tucked them into crisp envelopes with my parents' names written on the front, because part of me still believed presentation mattered. Proof mattered. If I made everything easy enough, clear enough, proud enough, nobody could miss it. My phone buzzed again. This time my sister. "You're not seriously making this dramatic, right?" I stared at that message with my thumb hovering over the screen, and for the first time that morning, a different question rose through the shock. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't confusion. This was familiar enough to them that they thought I'd help carry it. And in a few minutes, I had to walk downstairs, meet my friends, and act like I wasn't learning that the one day I could never reschedule had already been treated like it could. I didn't answer my sister right away because I already knew where that conversation would go. If I said I was hurt, I'd be dramatic. If I said nothing, I'd be mature. In my family, those were never opposites. They were instructions. I set the phone down on the hotel desk and looked at my reflection in the mirror over the dresser. The gown made me look older than I felt. The hood on the bed looked ceremonial and expensive and strangely fragile, like something that could only belong to a person from a family who arrived on time with flowers and took too many photos. I kept thinking, this can't be how the day starts. But another part of me, the older part, had already gone quiet. It knew this shape. It had lived in it for years. When people met my family, they usually understood us backwards. They thought my sister was the strong personality. They thought I was the calm one. They thought our parents had one difficult child and one gifted child, and that this balance, while exhausting, was manageable. What they didn't see was the way attention worked in our house. Attention did not follow effort. It followed heat. Whoever was loudest, hurt most visibly, or threatened the most, disruption became urgent. Everyone else learned to become useful. My sister understood that before I did. At school conferences, I would sit in those tiny molded chairs outside the classroom door with my backpack between my knees and wait for my parents to come out smiling. They always did. But the smile was brief, practical, already moving on. "Good, good," my father would say. "Teacher says you're doing excellent." One sentence. Sometimes 2 if I had scored especially high on something. Then my mother would lower her voice and say, "Now let's talk about your sister before she gets upset." My sister's teacher conferences took longer. Doors stayed closed. Voices rose and softened. My mother would come out with that tight look around her mouth that meant the household forecast had changed. A missed assignment, a conflict with a friend, a mood, a slight, a teacher who didn't understand her. By dinner, it would be the only topic. My father would sit forward with his elbows on the table and ask follow-up questions. My mother would retell each detail with the seriousness of a legal hearing. I would chew and wait for a pause that never really came. Sometimes my report card was still in my bag while they spent an hour discussing whether my sister felt supported. No one was cruel in the obvious way. That was part of what made it hard to name. I wasn't insulted. I was promoted out of needing things. "You're so independent. You never give us trouble. You understand. Be the mature one." Those sentences floated around me so often they started to sound like compliments. Adults love a child who lowers maintenance costs. Teachers loved it too. Relatives smiled when they said it, as if I had been born with some rare grace. I learned to nod when people praised my self-sufficiency, even when I was young enough to still want someone to ask if I was okay without me earning the question first. I remember exactly when the word changed shape for me. I was 13, standing in my aunt's kitchen during a holiday lunch, balancing a paper plate of rice and roasted chicken while the adults spoke over my head. My sister had disappeared upstairs after some argument about what she was wearing. My mother looked tired, my father looked embarrassed. An aunt touched my shoulder and said, with this warm approving laugh, "Thank God for you. You're the easy one." Everyone smiled. I smiled too. Reflex. Then she added, "Your parents don't have to worry about you." That landed somewhere sharp. I looked down at the gravy sliding toward the edge of my plate and understood. In the flat, clean way children sometimes understand things all at once. That easy did not mean loved. It meant absorbent. It meant delay your needs. It meant we can leave you on the emotional shelf because you won't break where people can see it. After that, I began helping them before they asked. I packed my own lunches, filled out my own forms, learned which bills stressed my father and which comments from relatives could ruin my mother's whole evening. I became preemptively agreeable. If my sister was having a bad week, I made myself smaller. If money was tight, I said I didn't need new shoes. If my birthday landed near one of her disasters, I acted relieved when plans changed. I got very good at making my disappointment look reasonable. That skill has a cost. You start to think being loved and being convenient are the same thing. By high school, I had built a whole identity around outrunning need. Straight grades, science fairs, Olympiad prep books with broken spines. I liked the work, that part was real. I liked the clean laws of physics and the comfort of experiments where conditions could be controlled and outcomes could be tested. But there was another current under all of it, and I knew it even then. If I became extraordinary enough, maybe I would stop being deferrable. The first time that theory got tested, I almost believed it would work. I was 17 when I won a national science prize. Not school level, not city level, national, a committee in blazers, a stage, a giant check for the photograph, my name printed in a program my father carried home in his briefcase. I can still remember the hotel ballroom where it happened, the stale cold air, the blue carpet with gold swirls. The moment they called my name and I stood up so fast my chair scraped. For one bright hour, I thought I had finally done something too visible to be absorbed by the family background. My parents were there that day. They looked proud. Really proud. My mother cried. My father shook my hand in a strange formal way, like he had met me at work and approved of my performance. On the drive home, he said, "This opens doors." My mother called 3 relatives before we even reached the highway. I sat in the back seat holding the plaque across my knees and let myself imagine the evening stretching around me. Dinner, questions, maybe. A story retold twice. Maybe. For once, I would get to stay at the center of the frame after the photo ended. We went to a restaurant I loved because my mother said we should celebrate properly. White tablecloths, water glasses, sweating little rings onto the paper. The plaque sat beside me in the booth. I remember tracing the engraved letters with one finger under the table while the waiter took our order. For 12 minutes, maybe 15, it happened. My father asked how many finalists there were. My mother asked whether the committee chair was important. I answered too carefully, trying not to look too pleased. My sister was quiet, scrolling on her phone. I noticed it. I noticed everything. Then her phone lit again. She looked at the screen, went still, and pushed back from the table with that dramatic inhale I recognized instantly. My mother asked, "What is it?" My sister said, "Nothing," which in our house meant everything. By the time appetizers arrived, we were no longer discussing the prize. We were discussing her boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, or almost ex. He had posted something vague, he had ignored a message, he had embarrassed her somehow. Details shifted every 5 minutes. The emotional weather did not. My mother reached across the table and held her hand. My father frowned like an engineer examining structural damage. The waiter set down dessert menus no one touched. My plaque remained against the booth wall, catching the restaurant light in brief silver flashes while my family conducted emergency response over someone who would not matter by autumn. At one point, my father looked at me and said, "We'll come back to your thing. Your thing. Not your award, not your win. Your thing." We never came back to it. I told myself that didn't mean anything. That breakups feel huge at that age. That families have to triage that being the stable one was not a punishment. I kept telling myself versions of that for years, because the alternative was uglier. The alternative was that I had learned to shine in a way that did not interrupt anyone. Standing there in the hotel room before my hooting, with my mother helping tape up a beverage startup banner 3 states away. I finally saw the pattern without its polite wrapping. My graduation wasn't being compared to a true emergency. It was being weighed against whichever crisis, spectacle, or performance asked more noisily for loyalty. And some part of me had always trained them for that. I had been the child who said it's fine before anyone asked if it was. The one who translated neglect into compliments. The one who heard independent, mature, easy, and built a whole life trying to make those words produce love. My phone buzzed again on the desk. Not my parents. Mina, I'm downstairs. Also, I brought mascara remover because commencement photos are emotional warfare. I laughed once through my nose, the kind of laugh that hurts a little. Then I picked up the hood from the bed with both hands, careful not to crease it, and felt a question move through me with cold precision. If all those years of being easy had led here, then what exactly had I been earning all this time? The answer I gave myself, for years, was MIT. Not because the name itself mattered to me the way it mattered to people back home, though I knew exactly how it sounded in other people's mouths. Not because I had some movie version dream of ivy walls and instant transcendence. MIT was concrete and fluorescent and often smelled like solder, old coffee, wet wool, and overheated electronics. It was swipe access and deadlines and printers jamming at 1 in the morning. It was not magic. But it was the first place that felt large enough to hold the scale of what I wanted without laughing at it. And if I'm honest, it was also the first achievement I believed my family could never accidentally minimize. I arrived in Cambridge with 2 suitcases, partial funding, and a folder of visa documents that I checked every hour, like they might evaporate if I stopped looking. It was late August. The air was thick and still warm, but every indoor hallway was aggressively air-conditioned. I remember dragging one suitcase over a cracked sidewalk near Massachusetts Avenue and looking up at the infinite corridor signs with a mix of awe and nausea. Students around me moved like they belonged there already. They wore backpacks that looked expensive in a casual way. They spoke in acronyms I pretended to understand. My first room was small enough that when I opened the closet door, it hit the edge of the bed. I stacked instant noodles in one corner, adapters in another, and pinned my stipend budget above the desk. Rent, transit, groceries, printing. The numbers never looked friendly. I picked up extra TA hours before I fully knew my own coursework. I learned which campus events had free food and which seminar cookies were worth the walk. In my first semester, there were days when lunch was lab coffee and a granola bar from my backpack because I had stretched the week too hard. I never told my parents that part. I told them the version that sounded clean. Professors are demanding, but good. Cambridge is beautiful, the work is hard, but I'm managing. My mother liked to ask about weather and whether I was eating enough. My father liked to ask who the smartest person in my cohort was and whether I could beat them. I answered both questions strategically. My sister, meanwhile, would call at random hours to narrate some new upheaval, a friend betrayal, a boss who didn't appreciate her, a move back, a man, usually a man. My parents always seemed fully briefed on those developments. They could never remember the name of my field. Still, MIT did something dangerous to me. It gave me a new scale of hope. Because here, effort actually changed outcomes. If an experiment failed, I could rerun it. If a simulation crashed, I could trace the error. If a reviewer was unfair, I could revise the paper until the argument became undeniable. The place trained me to believe enough precision could solve almost anything. So I started applying that logic to my family without admitting it. I worked like someone trying to close a proof. My research lived half in computation and half in fabrication, which meant my week swung between code and clean room. There were nights I sat in front of failed simulations at 2 a.m. The lab window blacked against my reflection, watching lines of output crawl across the screen only to end in numerical garbage. There were mornings I pulled on blue booties, gloves, and a hood in the cleanroom gowning area. Then stood under that filtered white light feeling less like a genius and more like a very tired person trying not to contaminate expensive equipment. The sounds of those years are still in me. Badge clicks, vacuum hiss, a centrifuge spinning up, the low complaint of old HVAC, Slack notifications from people pretending not to panic. My own footsteps in long corridors after midnight when the building emptied out and every vending machine looked like a moral test. I got good at surviving in small watching classmates order takeout without checking prices, hearing someone mention their parents had just wired rent again, sitting through group dinners where ski trips and summer houses floated through conversation like weather reports. No one was usually unkind. That almost made it worse. Their ease had no edge because it had never needed one. Mine was always manufactured. I had to calculate everything. If a conference travel reimbursement came late, I panicked quietly. If my stipend deposited a day after rent, I moved money around and told no one. I learned to look calm while checking my bank balance in bathroom stalls. Committee politics were its own theater. One professor loved my work and treated me like a future colleague. Another kept praising me in ways that felt almost insulting. Exceptionally sharp, he said once, tapping a page of my draft with one finger. My only question is whether you can sustain this pace. Not whether the work was good. Whether I could survive producing it. I nodded as if that were reasonable. Then I went home and revised until dawn. A different committee member once told me, "You have a tendency to overprepare." I almost laughed in his face. Overprepare was what people called it when they had never had the option of being forgiven for ordinary mistakes. I didn't overprepare because I was naturally disciplined. I overprepared because I had spent my life learning that if I left any room at all, someone would use it to downgrade the whole effort. Years passed like that, semester by semester, conference by conference, small wins tucked inside larger exhaustion. I published enough to become legible, taught enough sections to lose my voice one winter, missed weddings, birthdays, and one funeral because flights were impossible and deadlines were not. There were nights I wondered if I was ruining my own life for a title my family would use at parties and ignore in private. And still, I kept going. Because every time I imagined the finish line, I saw one scene with unreasonable clarity. My parents in Cambridge, sitting among other families, hearing my name read aloud in a room where no one could pretend not to understand what it meant. Looking at me, publicly, unmistakably, with pride too large to reroute. That image carried more weight than I wanted to admit. By the time I defended, I was held together by adrenaline, formatting corrections, and a level of caffeine that should probably qualify as institutional misconduct. The weeks before the dissertation defense blurred into slide edits, advisor comments, committee scheduling chaos, and arguments with latex at ungodly hours. I had stress dreams about missing equations and showing up to the room without shoes. The morning of the defense, I threw up in a department bathroom, rinsed my mouth, and gave the talk anyway. It went well, not just survivable, good. I could feel it halfway through, in the way the room changed. My advisor stopped frowning at his notes. One committee member leaned back with his arms crossed in that rare posture professors adopt when they are no longer looking for the hole. During questions, I answered cleanly, carefully. Once, even elegantly, the private deliberation felt endless. Then they called me back in, and my advisor smiled before he spoke. "Congratulations, doctor." For a second, I couldn't move. The room sharpened in weird details. The hum of the projector fan. A coffee stain on the conference table. The dry feel of the handshakes after. Someone from the lab hugged me too hard. Someone else opened cheap sparkling wine from a backpack, and it foamed onto the carpet. Photos were taken. My face hurt from smiling. I had done it. After all those years, I had crossed the thing itself. I stepped outside the building to call home before the congratulations blur could flatten it. It was early evening in Cambridge. The air had turned cool. Bikes ticked past on the street. I stood near a concrete planter with my phone against my ear and grinned like a child when my mother answered. "I passed." I said, "It's done." I defended. "Oh, good," she said, and I heard voices behind her. Clattering dishes, a television. "I told your father you would." Good. Not wonderful. Not "we're proud of you." Just good, in the tone people use when a package arrives intact. Then my sister's laugh cut through the background, loud and close. My mother lowered her voice a little and said, "Things are busy here." "With what?" A pause. "Your sister has someone over." I leaned against the planter, still smiling because my face hadn't yet gotten the message. "Someone. That boyfriend I mentioned," she said, "the new one. He seemed serious this time." Serious this time. I had just become a doctor after years of work that had bent my whole life around it. And my mother was half distracted because my sister had a man in the house who might last past autumn. I could hear plates moving. My father said something in the background I couldn't make out. My mother asked, "So when is the official graduation part?" The official graduation part. I looked across the street at students spilling out of buildings with backpacks and laptops and all the casual fatigue of ordinary brilliance. Something in me should have shut down right there. Lowered expectations, updated the model, but instead, it did the opposite. It got more precise. I told her the date, the hooting, the commencement, the exact schedule. "We'll come," she said, almost absently. "Of course we'll come. This one is important." When we hung up, I stayed outside a minute longer with the phone in my hand. The hurt was there, but so was something else. stubbornness, calculation. If the defense call could be blurred by noise at home, then the graduation could not. The graduation would be formal, public, photographed, timed. It would require tickets, travel, clothes, seats, a campus map, a visible act of showing up. No one could mistake it for just another update. That was the moment I made the decision I would later regret for how much it revealed. I would not lower the bar this time. I would build the day so carefully and make it so impossible to misunderstand that my family would have to choose clearly. And if they chose me in that room, in Cambridge, in front of everyone, maybe I could finally stop wondering what all those years had been for. Once I decided the graduation would be different, I started planning it with the intensity of a side experiment I could not afford to fail. MIT made that easy. In a way, the whole place runs on schedules, maps, badges, and logistics disguised as tradition. Once the commencement emails started arriving, I read every one like it contained a hidden code. Hooting rehearsal times, guest seating guidance, rain plans, regalia pickup, where doctoral candidates lined up, where families should stand after, which route would be blocked around Killian Court. I saved PDFs, highlighted paragraphs, cross-checked timing against restaurant availability and flight options. If love could be engineered through redundancy, I was going to engineer it. I booked my parents' flights first. I used almost all the points I had been hoarding for years. The emergency reserve I told myself was for visa problems, or funerals, or some future version of adulthood that might require leaving quickly. Watching that balance drop to nearly zero made my stomach tighten, but I clicked confirm anyway. A non-stop in a clean return. Decent arrival time, no excuses about bad connections. Then I booked them a hotel near Kendall Square because I knew if they stayed farther out, my father would complain about traffic and my mother would get flustered. Walking distance removed another variable. After that came the itinerary. I made it in color, blue for travel, gold for ceremony, green for meals, gray for buffer time. Because I knew buffer time was really panic prevention. I titled it MIT Graduation Weekend and put the Institute seal at the top because I knew my father liked official-looking things. Under each event, I added tiny notes. Leave hotel by 8:15 for best seating. Doctoral hooting lasts approximately this long. Photos after near the dome if weather holds. Dinner reservation at 6:30. Window table requested. I included addresses in full, links to maps, and screenshots of what each building entrance looked like. When I printed it, the pages still smelled warm from the department copier. I slid them into a clear folder and laughed at myself. Except it wasn't really laughter. It was the nervous sound a person makes when they know they are doing too much and continue anyway. Mina saw the folder on my desk one night in the lab and raised an eyebrow. Are you onboarding them into a space mission? It's just easier this way, I said. For them? She said. I didn't answer. The truth was more embarrassing than that. I wasn't just making it easy, I was making it impossible for them to fail accidentally. Every solved detail increased the chance that if something went wrong, I would have to call it by its real name. Still, the planning became its own kind of hope. Tangible hope. I could hold receipts, confirmation emails, reservation numbers, things with dates and codes and names attached. It felt less childish than wanting, more legitimate, more adult. I wasn't asking to be loved on principle. I was coordinating travel. I even thought about their photographs. That part was the most revealing, and I knew it while I was doing it. My family has always understood public pride more fluently than private tenderness. They know exactly which achievements photograph well, which ones can be forwarded to cousins, which ones make aunties on WhatsApp, send trophy emojis, and write. So impressive. So I planned visual moments they could use. Me in regalia under the Great Dome, a shot with my advisor if he was free. One by the Charles at dinner, city light behind us. One candid-looking image of my father pretending not to smile while my mother adjusted my hood. I could see the entire album before it existed. I told myself that was strategic, not sad. When I sent the itinerary, my mother replied in 12 minutes. This looks lovely. That word alone carried me for hours. My father wrote after that, ask where parents should sit for best view when they place the hood. Not if, when. I answered immediately, trying not to sound too eager. I checked, there's a guest section close to the aisle if you arrive early. I marked it on page 2. He gave the message a thumbs up. Then my mother called, and for the first time in months, the call had no static tension under it. She wanted to know if the ceremony was indoors, whether she needed a shawl, whether heels would be too much walking, whether the restaurant had fish because your father pretends to like steak but always regrets it. I stood by the sink in my apartment, one sock still on, and answered every question with an almost painful calm. Yes, indoors. Bring a light jacket anyway. No, not too many stairs. Yes, the restaurant has fish. I could hear cabinets opening and closing in the background at their house. Familiar sounds. Ordinary sounds. She sounded involved, not managing me, not distracting. Preparing. Before we hung up, she said, "You should send me a picture of the dress code. I don't want to look underdressed around all those professors." I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. All those professors, she was picturing it. The room, the occasion, herself in it. After that, I began making a terrible mistake. I began believing them. Not in the vague, cautious way I had done before. Not in the suspended maybe that lets you preserve an exit. I mean, I started telling people, "They're really coming." I told Mina. "Good," she said, and looked relieved on my behalf in a way that made me realize how much she had been bracing for disappointment. I told my advisor, too, when he asked whether my family would attend. We were standing outside his office after a meeting about final edits to the dissertation archive submission. He had one hand on the doorframe and his reading glasses still on. "Yes," I said. "They booked everything." He smiled. "That's wonderful. Make sure I meet them." That sentence lodged somewhere deep. Make sure I meet them. As if there would be a moment where the worlds touched and made sense. The home that raised me. The institution that tested me. The child who was easy. The adult who had become undeniably difficult to overlook. I started noticing details through that lens. On my walks across campus, I would imagine where they'd stand. Near the steps outside the dome, maybe by the brass railing. If my mother wanted better light, I timed the walk from the hotel to the ceremony route so they wouldn't feel rushed. I passed a florist and wondered if my father would think buying flowers was wasteful unless I suggested it first. Then hated myself for strategizing his tenderness like procurement. At night, I sometimes opened the reservation email for dinner just to look at it. 6 guests. Window request, Charles Riverview. The restaurant manager had replied that they couldn't promise the exact table but would note the occasion. PhD graduation. Congratulations. I reread that line too. One Saturday, my mother sent me a picture from a department store dressing room. She was wearing a blue blouse and asked, "Is this too bright?" I stared at the photo so long she sent another message. "Hello?" "No." I typed, "It's perfect. Perfect." That was the dangerous word, because it made me want more. If she was shopping for the day, then she cared about the day. If my father was asking about seating and weather, then he cared too. If they cared, then maybe I had been wrong to flatten every good sign into self-protection. Maybe families did improve in increments. Maybe people aged into better choices. Maybe enough years and enough proof had finally added up. Of course, hope changes your eyesight. I started editing old memories without meaning to. Maybe they were overwhelmed back then. Maybe they hadn't understood how much those earlier moments mattered. Maybe this was what repair looked like in a family like ours. Not confession, not dramatic apology, just showing up properly when it counted most. The planning accelerated after that. I mailed them printed copies of the itinerary in case they missed the email. I sent screenshots of the hotel booking and circled the check-in time. I asked my father if he wanted me to reserve a rideshare from the airport, and he wrote, "No need. We can manage." Which from him was practically exuberance. My mother asked if she should get a small gift for my advisor. I laughed and said no, but the fact that she asked felt intimate. As if she were already entering the world with me instead of waiting outside it. The week before commencement, I laid everything out on my bed, regalia bag. Tickets, dinner, confirmation, campus map, extra umbrella, safety pins, a little envelope with their names written on it. It looked like I was preparing for honored guests. And maybe that was the clearest thing of all. I wasn't just arranging travel. I was staging a recognition ceremony inside the recognition ceremony. A front row victory lap where my parents would finally witness, in the right lighting and with the right language around it, the life I had built beyond their habits. For a little while, that belief felt solid enough to stand on. So solid that when people asked, I didn't hedge anymore. I smiled and said the words like they were already true. My parents are coming. And because they had never sounded so sure before, I let myself feel something I should have known better than to trust. Certainty. Certainty lasted exactly 11 days. That was the gap between my mother asking about blouse colors and my sister sending a photo of a silver can mock-up into the family chat with 6 fire emojis and the caption, "Big things coming." At first, I barely looked at it. My phone was on the lab bench while I waited for a run to finish, and I assumed it was another one of her temporary enthusiasms. She had dated musicians, wellness coaches, a man who bought a drone and briefly called himself a cinematographer. There had been handmade candles, a pet accessory line, a podcast recorded for 3 episodes in a closet lined with winter coats. Every new relationship arrived wrapped in vocabulary that wanted funding. This one was different, only in the way dangerous people often are. He looked credible for just long enough. His name was Adrian. He had good teeth, expensive sneakers, and the kind of attentive eye contact that makes older adults feel seen and younger adults feel recruited. The first time I met him on video, he called my mother ma'am in this polished, joking way and asked my father detailed questions about distribution margins as if they were already business partners. By the end of that dinner, my parents were talking about him like he had vision. He was not a fool. That was part of the problem. He was one of those people who understood how to borrow the language of real competence without doing the slower work that tests it. Everything became strategy. Every casual meal became brand positioning. Every family barbecue became community activation. If someone disagreed with him, he smiled and said they were thinking small. If my sister was upset, he transformed it into evidence that nobody supported their future enough. And he was very good at identifying what each person wanted from him. He praised my father's practicality, asked for advice about coolers, folding tables, licensing. He praised my mother's hosting instincts, told her she had natural event energy. With my sister, he played savior and co-founder at once. She didn't just have a boyfriend, she had a witness, a hype man, a reason her current instability might secretly be ambition. I tried, at first, not to be dismissive. I knew how easy it would be for any criticism from me to sound like contempt. The sister with the exciting life. The academic with the suspiciously sharp opinions. I could already hear how it would be translated. So when she started mentioning his canned cocktail idea more often, I stayed neutral. The product had a name I won't repeat because even now it makes me tired. Something citrus-forward and aggressively modern. He had logo mock-ups, flavor concepts, a friend who knew packaging, and a social media account that seemed to exist mostly to document meetings in coffee shops. Every photo had the same aesthetic. Laptop open, can in hand. Ring on finger visible. Captions about hustle and momentum and building in public. Then one evening my mother called while I was leaving campus. My backpack heavy with printed drafts and my badge still clipped to my pocket. "Your sister's boyfriend has an investor coming," she said. Not hello, not how are you. Just a headline, as if I had been tracking the plot already. "What kind of investor?" "A local man with restaurants," she said. "Apparently he might help them scale." Scale. My mother had started using his verbs. I crossed Mass Ave on the walk signal and listened while she explained that Adrian wanted to host a proper launch event at their house. Nothing huge. Just friends, neighbors, a few local people, some social media photos, and this investor stopping by to see the energy. I could hear excitement under her voice, but also strain. The kind that meant the family had already been emotionally drafted. "When is it?" I asked. A small pause. "Same weekend as your ceremony." I stopped at the curb while bikes slid past. "Same weekend, yes, but not all weekend," she said quickly. "Just that Saturday afternoon." My hooting ceremony was Saturday. For a moment, I honestly thought she must not remember the timing. That seemed easier than the alternative. "My ceremony is Saturday afternoon." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well," she said, "your thing is formal anyway. Your thing," the old phrase, back in different clothes. I stood there with traffic moving around me and said very carefully, "It's not just formal. It's the doctoral hooting. It's the main family event." "I know that," she said, in the tone people use when they don't want to discuss whether they know something. "But his event is time-sensitive as if there were a perishable chemical reaction happening in the backyard. As if my PhD hooting were a brunch reservation." That night, the family group chat woke up like a separate planet had entered our orbit. My sister sent renderings of custom signage. Adrian sent a mock-up of branded coolers. My mother asked whether white linens would show stains to easily. My father offered to borrow extra folding chairs from church. At first, I kept waiting for someone to acknowledge the collision plainly. Nobody did. Finally, I typed, "We need to talk about the fact that this is during my MIT graduation." Adrian did not reply. Of course he didn't. That would have made him accountable. My sister answered first. "It's a launch, not a random party." Then, a minute later, "This could actually change our lives." I stared at those words until my face went hot. Change our lives. I had spent years changing my life in ways measurable, exhausting, and real. But hers was always one charismatic man away from becoming the urgent future of the whole household. I called my father. He picked up on the fourth ring, sounding distracted, as if I had interrupted him in the middle of moving furniture. "Dad," I said, "you booked flights. You know the ceremony date. Why is there suddenly another event?" He exhaled. "It came up." "It didn't just come up. They picked the date." "He has an investor coming by," my father said. "Sometimes opportunities move fast. So does commencement." I said before I could stop myself. Silence. Then he shifted into the voice I knew too well. Patient, reasonable, slightly injured by my tone. "Don't make this into a competition." That sentence was almost artful. Because the competition already existed. I had not created it. I was just refusing to pretend both things belonged in the same category. "I'm not making it one," I said. "I'm saying they're not equal." He ignored that cleanly. "Be flexible." There it was. I laughed once, sharp and ugly. Then regretted it immediately because now I sounded exactly as reactive as they would later describe me. "Flexible how?" "We're figuring it out," he said. "Maybe we can do part of both." Part of both. I pictured them teleporting between Cambridge and our backyard 3 states away. "That is not possible." "Don't be rigid," he said. Rigid. Another family word. It meant I had brought facts into a system that preferred mood. After that call, the tone shifted everywhere. It was subtle enough that if I repeated it to anyone else, I would sound paranoid. But I knew what I was hearing. My parents stopped talking like they were definitely attending. They started talking like attendance itself was a gift under review. My mother texted, "If we come later, will that still work?" My sister wrote, "You know, ceremonies are kind of long anyway." My father asked whether the event would be streamed, as if I had spent 7 years in labs and committee rooms, so they could maybe watch me buffered on an iPad between mini tacos and branded drink cans. The details of Adrian's launch got more absurd the more seriously my family took them. There would be a ring light station for content, a printed step hand repeat banner near the fence, signature garnishes in little metal trays. He had ordered custom shirts for the core team, which apparently included my sister and, for some reason, my mother. There was talk of 1 investor, possibly 2 if a friend brought someone. All of it sounded like social theater wearing a borrowed startup costume. And still, every time I tried to object, I heard the counterargument before they said it. "You think your degree makes you better than everyone. You don't respect relationships. You don't understand how the real world works. You're always so cold about these things." My family had years of practice converting my plainest disappointment into character evidence. So I started editing myself in real time. Instead of saying, "This is insulting," I said, "I'm confused about the logistics." Instead of saying, "Are you seriously comparing a backyard beverage party to my PhD hooting?" I said, "I thought the plans were already set." Instead of saying "choose," I said, "Let me know what you decide." That was the humiliating part. Even as I felt the insult clearly, I kept offering them softer language to hide inside. One night, Mina found me in the lab kitchen staring into the microwave while it rotated a bowl of soup I had already heated. "You okay?" she asked. "My sister's boyfriend has an investor," I said. She waited. And apparently, this may affect whether my parents attend commencement. The microwave beeped. Neither of us moved. Then Mina said, very quietly, "You hear how insane that sounds, right?" I did. That was the problem. I heard it perfectly. But hearing something clearly and naming it at home were never the same skill. By the end of that week, the insult had become impossible to misread. No one in my family was treating my graduation as fixed anymore. It was one obligation among others. Negotiable, adjustable, potentially spendable. My once-in-a-lifetime hooting ceremony at MIT had entered the same category as a boyfriend's launch optics. And somehow, I was already being prepared to be grateful for whatever portion of my own day they decided to leave me. After that, I stopped asking the direct question. Not because I didn't want the answer, because I wanted it too much. If I asked, "Are you coming or not?" then someone would have to say yes or no. A clean answer would end the suspense, but it would also end my ability to pretend this was still confusion. As long as they stayed slippery, I could keep arranging my disappointment into temporary shapes. Delayed flight, miscommunication, last-minute compromise, anything but the thing waiting underneath. So the week before commencement turned into a strange low-grade chase. My father said the flights were being sorted, which was interesting because I had already booked the flights. The hotel was already paid for. The confirmations were sitting in my email. complete with seat assignments and a cheerful message about check-in opening 24 hours before departure. But when I texted, just confirming your arrival time, he replied, "We're sorting travel details." As if transportation were still a philosophical concept. I called him from outside Building 13 while a delivery truck backed into a loading zone and beeped steadily behind me. "What needs sorting?" I asked. "Just things here," he said. "Don't get worked up." That phrase again. Don't react to what is happening. React to my discomfort with your awareness of it. "What things?" "A lot on your sister's side," he said. "You know how these events are." I almost asked which event he meant, mine or hers. Instead, I said, "I need to know if I should keep the hotel reservation as is." He gave a little sigh, wounded by logistics. "Why are you making it transactional?" "Because money was one of the only places reality left fingerprints." But I didn't say that. I said, "I'm trying to plan. We're planning too," he said, and ended the call with the kind of vague warmth that sounds affectionate until you realize it answered nothing. My mother became fixated on the live stream. At first she asked casually, "Do they broadcast it?" Then she wanted a link. Then she wanted to know if it could be watched later. Then, whether there would be close-ups or just a wide angle. She asked these things in the voice of someone being practical, but every question made my skin prickle. People do not ask for backup access when they are confident they'll be in the room. One afternoon, while I was pinning alterations on my gown in my apartment mirror, she texted, "If we got delayed, could someone film your part?" Your part. Like I was in a pageant number. Like the whole day could be reduced to a clip. I set the phone face down on the sink and stared at my own expression until it smoothed out. My sister was worse because she answered without answering at all. She sent selfies under strings of half-hung lights. Boomerangs of metallic streamers being unpacked. A close shot of lime-colored napkins with the logo printed in white. Once she sent a picture of herself in oversized sunglasses holding a cardboard box labeled promo materials and wrote, "Chaos lol." I replied, "Are mom and dad still flying out Friday?" She answered 3 hours later with a photo of custom koozies. I stopped opening her messages right away after that. Commencement week changed the campus atmosphere in ways I had always loved from a distance. Suddenly, the institute looked ceremonial and tired at the same time. Folding chairs appeared in ordered rows. Staff in polos checked routes and barriers. Parents began trickling in with campus maps held too high and walking shoes not built for Cambridge brick. The dome seemed brighter than usual in morning light. Every lobby had flowers somewhere. Every conversation carried an undertow of endings. Doctoral rehearsal was held in a room that smelled faintly of dust and old fabric. We sat in rows with our regalia bags and listened to instructions about line order, pacing, names, and where to stop for hooting. People whispered jokes under their breath. Someone behind me was eating mince loud enough to suggest panic. I kept my phone screen down on my lap and still felt it there like a pulse. Every few minutes I checked it, nothing from my parents. Then a thumbs up from my mother on a message I had sent 6 hours earlier. Then my sister again, with a selfie in front of a balloon arch frame. No explanation attached. At the break, I stepped into the hallway and unlocked my phone before I even realized I was moving. Mina was there before I saw her, leaning against the wall with a coffee she had definitely forgotten to drink. "You're grinding your teeth," she said. "I'm not, you are." I looked back at the rehearsal doors. Through the narrow window, I could see black garment bags, people talking in little circles, faculty drifting like distracted birds. They still haven't told me. Mina didn't ask who. She knew. I showed her the latest thread. My father's vagueness, my mother's livestream questions, my sister's decorative nonsense. Mina read it without commentary, handed the phone back and said very softly, "People don't drift into missing something this big. They decide." I hated her for being right for about 3 seconds. Then I hated that I needed someone else to say it out loud. "They might still come," I said, and even to me it sounded like a line from a script I had outgrown. Mina tipped her coffee cup in one hand. "Maybe, but this." She nodded toward the phone. "This is not confusion." I didn't answer because my throat had tightened too fast. The hallway around us smelled like paper programs and floor polish. Somewhere farther down, someone laughed. Rehearsal resumed in 5 minutes. Ordinary time kept moving, which felt almost insulting. That evening, I promised myself I would stop. Not forever, just for one night. One night without checking flight status, refreshing messages, rereading Hoffenser's like they contained hidden mercy. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, left it in my apartment, and walked to the Charles with my keys in one pocket and my MIT ID in the other. It was already cooling off outside. The sky over the river had that pale metallic color it gets before dark, and the wind carried a damp edge off the water. The river path was busy without being loud. Runners passed in soft intervals. Cyclists clicked by, families walked three wide. Across the water, Boston looked almost staged, all lit windows and reflective glass. I sat on a bench with peeling green paint and watched the light lower itself over the ripples. For the first time in days, I had nothing to react to. No notification, no half-lie, no logistical smoke, just the river. I tried, there on that bench, to imagine the day without them. Not as punishment, not as theater. As a practical adult exercise. Wake up, get dressed, meet friends, walk in, be hooded, smile for photos, eat dinner with the people who came, go home, survive. It was possible. People did it every year. Probably international students with parents on other continents. Estranged families, dead parents, financial barriers, visa barriers, real barriers. I was not unique in wanting people who couldn't or wouldn't appear. That thought steadied me more than I expected. The campus lights flicked on behind me one by one. I could hear the low slap of water against the embankment. Somewhere a saxophone was playing badly and bravely. I let myself imagine another version of adulthood, one less theatrical than the one I had been rehearsing. Maybe maturity was not finally getting chosen. Maybe it was learning not to hand your nervous system over to people who mistake your silence for resilience. I sat with that long enough that it almost became true. Long enough that when I stood up, my breathing was even. Long enough that I bought myself takeout on the walk back without checking my bank app first. Long enough that I came home, saw the dark phone on my desk, and didn't touch it for 10 full minutes. When I finally did, there was no clarity waiting, just more suspension. My mother had sent, "Call when you can." My father had sent, "We'll know more tomorrow." And my sister, at 8:47 p.m., had posted another story. This time, it was a close-up of a ring light glowing in their backyard. Dusk while someone tested camera angles near a table full of silver cans. I stared at it, then locked the phone and set it back down. No certainty. No confession. No rescue. But something had shifted anyway. Not in them. In me. A thin, temporary layer of calm had formed over the panic. And though I didn't trust it, I could feel it there. Maybe they were still deciding. Maybe they had already decided. Maybe I was the last person refusing to admit it. Either way, for a few hours by the river, I had practiced standing on my own day without them. And the most dangerous part was this. I had nearly believed I could. Graduation morning arrived with the kind of bright weather people later call perfect. The light was clean, the sky was hard blue. Even the wind seemed organized. I woke before my alarm in the hotel room I had booked for my parents and ended up using myself. After checking out of my apartment for the weekend to make the day feel more ceremonial. For a few disorienting seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the extra garment bag on the chair, the unopened welcome chocolates on the dresser, the 2 paper envelopes with my parents' names still untouched, and the whole truth returned at once like a muscle spasm. No new messages. I checked anyway. Group chat, nothing. My mother's last text still sat there. Call when you can. My father's, "We'll know more tomorrow," had aged into insult overnight. My sister had posted a sunrise boomerang from the backyard with the caption, "Big day. Big day." I stood at the sink brushing my teeth in my undershirt and stared at myself in the mirror until foam gathered at the corners of my mouth. It looked feral. I rinsed, tied my hair back, and dressed slowly, as if slowness itself could delay the hour of certainty. The gown still smelled faintly of packaging and dry cleaning solvent. The hood was heavier than it looked, with that glossy panel of color folded precisely over my arm. I pinned my name card where they told us to pin it, slid my phone into the pocket sewn inside the gown lining, and switched it to vibrate. I told myself the phone was there for logistics, for updates, for emergencies. The truth was uglier. I still wanted the miracle text, "Running late." At the entrance. We made it. In the lobby, families were already gathering in small islands of excitement. A mother in a coral dress was smoothing her son's collar while holding a bouquet wrapped in tissue paper. 2 grandparents argued gently over whether they should take the photo in front of the staircase or outside. Someone had brought white orchids. Someone else had a giant foil balloon that said, "Congrats, doctor," and kept bouncing off the ceiling lights. Every few seconds, another elevator opened and released more joy into the room. Mina spotted me immediately. She had coffee in one hand and the expression of someone prepared to either celebrate or commit a felony on my behalf. "You ate?" "Yes, you're lying." "Half a bagel." Terrible. Acceptable for today. She looked over my shoulder once, a quick involuntary glance toward the entrance, and then back at me. She didn't ask. I loved her for that. We walked toward campus in the cool morning air with a loose cluster of people from the lab. Black gowns fluttered open at the hem, shoes clicked against the pavement, parents passed us carrying flowers, garment bags, camera straps, and that strange, relieved energy families have when they feel they have successfully delivered a person to a milestone. Every 10 steps, someone stopped us to ask for a picture. Can you take one of us? Do you mind getting the dome in the background? Sorry, one more. She blinked. I kept smiling for strangers while my phone sat against my ribs like a trapped thing. The staging area before the hooding felt more intimate than the larger commencement crowds. That was almost worse. Bachelor ceremonies can blur into mass spectacle. Doctoral hooting is precise, slower. Each person has survived enough to have a story. Advisors appear in regalia. Families sit differently. They are not just watching a student cross a stage. They are watching a ritual built around the idea that someone stood behind this person long enough to bring them here. Or so it seemed. We lined up by school and program. Faculty moved through with clipboards. The room smelled faintly of wool, perfume, stale coffee, and anxiety. Everyone looked formal and slightly unreal. A classmate I barely knew introduced me to his parents, who shook my hand like I had been part of a campaign. Another candidate cried quietly while her grandmother adjusted the front of her robe with both trembling hands. I kept checking the side aisle where guest seating would fill. Nothing. Then not mine. The reserved section I had mapped for my parents came into view once I had my place in line. 2 seats near the aisle, exactly where I'd hoped they would sit so they could see the hood placed over my shoulders. Empty. The paper program. And one seat had curled slightly at the edge in the air conditioning. A couple farther down was taking selfies. A child swung her patent leather shoes from the edge of her chair. My seat stayed clean, untouched, waiting with a dignity I no longer had. I told myself families arrive late. Traffic, security, bathroom lines, wrong entrance. I made excuses with professional speed. My chest hurt while I did it. The ceremony began. Music first. Then the rustle of everyone standing. Then the formal voices. Names of administrators. Words about scholarship, endurance, discovery. The kind of language that usually makes me impatient suddenly felt unbearable because each sentence seemed to assume a shared emotional architecture I could not locate. Around me, phones lifted in the audience. Parents leaned forward. Some people cried before anything had even happened. I watched the empty seats every time applause rose. Still empty. At one point, I caught myself calculating impossible travel scenarios. Maybe they had flown red-eye and gone straight from the airport. Maybe one parent would come and the others stay. Maybe they were already in the back and I just hadn't seen them yet. Hope makes you stupid in very specific ways. It turns adults into gamblers against visible odds. Rows moved forward, name after name. Each hooting took only seconds. But the approach to it stretched strangely in the body. A few steps, stop, advance, wait, smile if someone photographed you from the side. My phone stayed against my hip on vibrate, and every time another audience section shifted or a cough echoed or fabric brushed my pocket, my nervous system leaped like it had heard salvation. Then it happened for real. One buzz, I froze in line, reached into the gown pocket under the drape of fabric, and looked down at the screen while the person ahead of me stepped forward. Dad? For one cracked second. Relief came first. See? I thought, here it is, late. But here? I opened it. We couldn't leave your sister alone to handle this. We'll celebrate when you're back. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Worth the name. No mention of flights, traffic, conflict, impossible timing, or some last-minute catastrophe. Just the truth, stripped bare enough to breathe. They had chosen the other event. Not because they physically could not come, because they believed my sister should not have to manage hers without them. I read it once, then again, because the human mind does strange things when a sentence changes the memory of your life in real time. The maybe was dead, not delayed, not confused, not torn, chosen. A faculty marshal touched my elbow lightly. You're up. I put the phone back in my pocket and stepped forward. I have no beautiful account of courage here. I did not feel transformed. I felt split in two. One part of me was moving on instructions learned over years. Stand straight. Keep walking. Don't make a scene. Don't cost anyone extra labor. The other part wanted to leave the line, leave the room, leave the whole institution to complete the ritual without my body if that was what it took to avoid becoming visible in my humiliation. But training won. I walked when they called my name. The stage lights were warmer than I expected. My advisor stood waiting in his regalia, kind and composed. He smiled with real pride as I reached him. I smiled back because my face still knew how the hood settled over my shoulders, heavier for an instant before it found its place. There was applause. I heard it as if through walls. Cameras flashed from somewhere in the audience. I did not look at the seats again while I was on stage. I knew what was there, nothing. When I stepped down, my hands were shaking inside the sleeves. The rest of the ceremony continued with ruthless normalcy. More names, more applause, more proud families leaning into the aisle for photos. I sat in my chair with my back straight and my jaw locked and understood something irreversible. The pain was not only that they were absent, it was that the absence had entered the architecture of the moment itself. It would now live there permanently, stitched into the memory beside the hood, the applause, the sunlight, the program, the sound of my name. By the time the closing remarks began, I wasn't wondering anymore whether they might appear at the last minute. They had already arrived exactly where they wanted to be. And my empty seats, row by row, had told me before the text did. When the ceremony ended, people stood all at once, and the room broke into reunion. Chairs scraped, programs folded, families spilled into the aisles with flowers and camera straps, and that relieved. Breathless laughter that comes after long pressure. Finally, let's go. I stayed seated for one extra second, maybe two, because I needed the crowd to start moving before I trusted my legs. Then Mina was there. She bent down, wrapped both arms around me hard enough to pull the air back into my lungs, and said straight into my shoulder, "Doctor, look at you." That almost did me in. Not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. She was proud in the clean, uncomplicated way I had been trying to script for my family for years. No management, no comparison, no side plot attached, just joy. The rest came fast after that. 2 people from my lab, then 3. My advisor, still in regalia, finding me through the crowd with that rare, unguarded smile professors save for moments they know mattered. He shook my hand, then ignored the hand and pulled me into a brief, awkward hug anyway. "You were excellent," he said. "I'm very proud of you." For a few minutes, the day changed shape. We moved out toward the open area near the aisle where people were taking photos. My hood sat correctly now. The sunlight from outside reached through the entrance in bright strips. Someone handed me flowers. Someone else fixed the front of my gown. My advisor introduced me to his wife, who said she had heard all about my work and meant it. A classmate's mother kissed my cheek and said, "Your family must be over the moon." I smiled without answering, and somehow the world did not collapse. Photo after photo happened. Mina made me stand under a patch of good light near a stone wall. My advisor stood beside me with one arm tucked behind his back, formal as ever. Labmates crowded in and ruined the formal shot by making me laugh. For one brief and possible stretch of time, I felt what I had wanted all along. Not perfect repair, not rewritten childhood. Just the very plain human experience of being recognized at the finish line by people whose faces showed they understood the road had been hard. I could have survived on those minutes for a long time. That was when my phone started vibrating nonstop inside the gown pocket. I almost ignored it. Then I thought maybe, stupidly, maybe one of my parents had stepped away from the party and come to their senses in private. Maybe there would be a voice message with an apology shaped like actual remorse. Maybe they were finally embarrassed enough to speak like adults. I looked at the screen. Mom video calling. Mina saw my face change. "You don't have to answer." "I know," I said. But I answered anyway, because hunger does not become wisdom just because it has been humiliated. The call opened in chaos. Music, wind, voices, talking over each other. Bright daylight, so harsh the camera kept blowing out the image. For a second, all I saw was sky and part of my mother's forehead. Then the phone lowered and there she was, smiling too widely, lipstick brighter than usual, cheeks flushed with busyness and public hosting. "There's our doctor," she shouted, not said. Shouted because the backyard was loud enough that everyone had to perform over it. I was standing in MIT regalia, flowers in one arm, advisor 3 feet away. And suddenly, my graduation existed inside a 6-inch screen held above a tray of catered appetizers. "Hi," I said, and heard how flat my own voice sounded. My mother either didn't notice or chose not to. "Show them your outfit," she called, as if I were 7 in a school play. Before I could answer, she swung the camera around the yard. The launch party was in full production. White cocktail tables, ring lights switched on in broad daylight, a printed banner behind the drink station. Silver cans lined in perfect little rows inside tubs of ice. People in matching black shirts with the brand logo across the chest. My father near the fence talking to a man in loafers and no tie who looked exactly like the kind of local investor someone would call important if he owned 2 restaurant locations and knew how to stand with one hand in his pocket. My sister in a fitted dress, already posing with a can angled toward the camera. Custom shirts. For them? I looked down at my own rented hood and felt something bitter move through me. They had coordinated outfits for a boyfriend's beverage launch and sent me a video call between toasts. My mother turned the phone toward a cluster of guests. Everybody, my child just got their PhD from MIT. There was scattered applause. A few cheers. Someone lifted a can toward the screen. One woman I had never seen before leaned in and said, "That's amazing, sweetie," with the strained cheer of a person, including a stranger, in someone else's event. Then Adrian appeared. Of course, perfect timing. He slid into frame with one hand on my sister's waist and gave me a broad, warm smile that did not reach his eyes. "Legend," he said. "Huge day for both of us. Both of us." That sentence was almost so offensive it became abstract. Behind him, a server walked past with a tray of tiny cups rimmed in chili salt. My father laughed at something the investor said. Music bumped from somewhere near the patio. The ring light reflected in the sliding glass door like a second fake moon. Mina, standing beside me, went very still. My mother turned the camera back to herself. "We wanted to include you, include me." As if I had wandered into the wrong calendar. As if my presence was the thing being accommodated. I said nothing. Which, in my family, has always been dangerous because silence creates a vacuum they rush to fill with interpretation. My sister grabbed the phone next. Her face appeared too close to the camera, all lashes and irritation and practiced brightness. "Can you not look like that?" I blinked. "Like what?" "Like we murdered someone," she hissed, dropping her voice just enough to make the cruelty private. Then, louder, for anyone listening nearby, "We're literally calling to celebrate you." I stepped farther away from my advisor and the others without realizing I was moving. The edge of the crowd gave me a little space, but not enough privacy to contain the humiliation. Families were still taking pictures around me. Someone's grandmother was fixing a stole, 2 little kids in dress shoes ran past. And I was standing there like a costumed interruption in my own day. "You missed the ceremony," I said. My sister rolled her eyes so slightly most people would have missed it. I didn't. "Mom and Dad can visit campus another time." Another time. There it was, the complete replacement of the irreplaceable with a future errand. "This investor is here now," she added, and turned the camera so I could see him again, as if his physical presence should settle the matter. He was holding one of the branded cans while my father nodded at him with serious concentration. My mother was straightening the edge of the dessert table. Someone in a logo shirt walked by carrying a box of more merch. It looked polished enough from a distance. It looked absurd up close. A suburban backyard dressed as a startup launch, while my doctorate became a handheld side segment between beverage tastings. And still, part of me was tempted to play along. That part is hard to admit, but it's true. A starved part of me wanted to accept this counterfeit version because at least it was attention. At least my mother had called. At least people were saying congratulations. However badly timed, however contaminated by someone else's event. Years of scarcity distort your standards. They make scraps feel negotiable. Then my sister said, "You're making this awkward." That did it. Not because it was the cruelest thing said that day, because it was the oldest. The family translation machine, worry into life right on schedule. Their choice became my atmosphere. Their absence became my facial expression. Their disrespect became my awkwardness. My mouth went dry. In the background, someone announced a toast. Adrian lifted his hands like a man about to thank a room for believing in his disruptive beverage vision. My mother was already turning away from the screen to hear him better. I realized then what the call actually was. Not an apology, not inclusion, not repair. Proof of attendance, a way for them to tell themselves they had done something, checked the box, contacted the graduate, folded my milestone into theirs without ever having to stop theirs for mine. "Congratulations," Adrian was saying to the crowd or to his brand or to himself. I couldn't tell. My mother glanced back at the phone and beamed. "See? We're celebrating everyone today. Everyone." The false relief shattered so completely I could almost hear it. I looked at the screen, at the custom shirts, the branded cans, the investor, my parents in motion around a party they had chosen over the one thing in my life that could not happen twice. And I understood that even this call was another erasure. They had not missed my day and then reached for me. They had turned my day into content. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Not dramatically, no speech, no raised voice. I just touched the red icon and watched the screen go black. And for a second, I could see my own face reflected there over the MIT logo on my program. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and stood still in the middle of all that sunlight and celebration, trying to understand why silence felt more violent than shouting. Mina did not ask what happened. She had seen enough. She took the flowers out of my arm before I crushed them and said, "Come on." The rest of the afternoon moved in fragments. Photos I barely remember. A classmate's father insisting on taking one of me with the dome behind me because you need at least one proper one. My advisor speaking to me kindly in a lower voice than usual, as if he could tell something had broken and was trying not to step on the glass. The official commencement crowds thickening. Heat off the pavement, applause from another ceremony drifting over from somewhere farther on campus. Every few minutes, someone said congratulations, and I answered on instinct. At some point, I changed nothing about my appearance. I kept the regalia on. That mattered to me more than I understood at first. Maybe because I didn't want to let my family's behavior downgrade the formality of the day inside my own body. Maybe because changing clothes would have felt too much like cleaning up after them. So when evening came and we walked to the restaurant overlooking the Charles, I was still carrying the whole costume of the life they had declined to witness properly. The reservation was for 6. I had booked it weeks earlier under my name, with a note about the graduation. Imagining the host leading us to a table by the window while my parents looked around approvingly at the river and city lights. Instead, the hostess glanced from the reservation screen to our small group and said, "Will the rest of your party be joining?" There are moments when humiliation becomes administrative. "Just 3, I said. She smiled the neutral smile of people trained not to react to disappointment and led us through the dining room past tables full of families still in celebration clothes. Flowers leaned against chairs. Champagne flutes flashed in the light. Parents were telling the same stories over and over because that is what people do when they are proud and want to relive the hard parts with a happy ending. Our table sat by the window anyway. 6 place settings, 6 water glasses, 6 folded napkins. The Charles beyond the glass looked dark blue and almost black, where the wind chopped the surface into scales. A bridge glowed farther downriver. Boston's lights trembled in the water like something unstable trying to hold shape. Mina sat across from me. Arjun from the lab took the seat beside her, still wearing his tie loosened at the throat. Neither of them filled the extra chairs with conversation. That was the gift. They let the emptiness stay visible. The server asked whether we wanted to wait for the others. "No," I said. He took away 3 menus and 3 sets of silverware. The sound of plates being lifted off the table felt absurdly loud. I put my phone down beside the bread plate and stared at it while Mina unfolded her napkin. "You don't have to do anything tonight," she said. "I know." But I also knew I had reached the edge of the old strategy. If I did what I had always done, I would spend the next week translating their abandonment into softer language. They were under pressure. Your sister needed them. It was badly timed. They meant well, they called, didn't they? By next month, I would be the one repairing their image in my own mind. By the next family holiday, I would be expected to show up with a gift and a normal face. I could already feel that machinery trying to start. My mother had sent a text after the call. "Proud of you. Sorry today was complicated." Complicated? The word sat there gleaming with insult. I unlocked the phone and opened the family group chat. The same chat that had once held flight updates, weather questions, and my father's "proud of you, kid." My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, then stopped, then started again. I wrote the version I had always been trained to write first. "I know things came up, deleted. I'm disappointed, but I understand." Deleted. "Wish today had gone differently." Deleted. Each sentence felt like a small act of self-erasure. I could feel my body resisting the truth in real time, reaching for tact the way some people reach for painkillers. Arjun, who had been tactfully studying the menu upside down, said without looking up, "If you want the record to be clean, right? Facts." I looked at him. He shrugged once. "No adjectives. Harder to gaslight." That word made Mina snort into her water glass despite herself. And for the first time all day, I almost smiled. So I wrote facts. "I paid for your flights and hotels so you could attend my PhD hooting at MIT. I asked repeatedly whether you were coming. You chose to stay home for my sister's boyfriend's launch party. You let me believe until the ceremony that you might still come. You did not miss an emergency. You made a decision." The words looked too sharp at first, almost rude, which told me they were probably accurate. I kept going. Calling from the party did not make this supportive. It made the disrespect public. I will not pretend this was love expressed imperfectly. That line made my hands shake. Because it crossed a border I had spent my whole life avoiding. It refused interpretation as accident. It took the family's favorite exit, good intentions, poor execution, and closed it. The server came by to pour water, and I flipped the phone over until he left. Then I added the part that made the whole thing undeniable. Please reimburse me for the unused flights and hotel by the end of the month. I stared at that sentence a long time. Money had always been sacred in my family, but not in a noble way. It was where fairness suddenly became legible. You could ignore hurt, you could debate tone, but a charge, a booking, a canceled seat, those were real enough to force acknowledgement. Asking for reimbursement took this out of the realm of feelings and into the realm of consequences. It also terrified me, because I knew what it would sound like to them. Cold, petty, ungrateful, transactional. The very qualities they liked to project onto me whenever I stopped making emotional labor look free. Mina read my face. Send it, she said. I looked down again and typed the last line slowly. I will not attend any future family event until this is acknowledged, honestly. Not discussed, not processed. Not explained away, acknowledged honestly. There it was. The cost. Not just money. Access. My chest tightened so hard I had to put the phone down for a second. The restaurant around us glowed with soft yellow light and silverware and murmured celebration. At a nearby table, a father was showing someone a photo on his phone with the pride of a man replaying a miracle. A waiter passed with a dessert tray. Outside, the river kept moving as if none of this mattered. I thought, if I send this, they may never forgive me. Then another thought arrived right behind it, quiet and brutal. If I don't, they won't even have to notice what they did. That made the choice. I picked up the phone, read the message once more, and sent it to the entire family group chat. The bubble turned blue. There was no taking it back. For a second, nothing happened. No reply, no dots. Just the message sitting there among old logistics and cheerful lies, like a legal document dropped into a birthday party. My pulse was loud in my ears. I set the phone face down on the table and exhaled so slowly it almost hurt. Mina reached across and touched the back of my hand once. Briefly. Not pity. Witness. I had done the thing I was never supposed to do. I had made being easy unavailable, and somewhere between the untouched place settings, the river outside, and the cold weight of my phone on white tablecloth, I understood that whether repair came or not, something had already changed. For the first time in my life, I had stopped converting abandonment into understanding. The first reply came before our entrees, not from my mother, from my father. Cruel. Just that one word at first. Dropped into the group chat like a verdict. Then another message. After everything we've done for you, this is how you speak to us on a family day. A family day, not your graduation day. Not commencement, not the hooting ceremony they had skipped. A family day, as if all events were communal property until I selfishly claimed one. My phone lit again before I could even put it down. My mother, you embarrassed us in front of everyone. Then, relatives are asking what is wrong. Then, couldn't this wait? I stared at the 3 messages in a row and felt a strange, almost manic calm rise through the anger. Of course. Of course this was the first injury they named. Not what they had done. Not the lie. Not the empty seats. Embarrassment. Optics. The breach in the family image was suddenly the real emergency. Mina looked at my face from across the table. Bad. I slid the phone toward her. She read silently, jaw tightening. Arjun leaned over, read too, and actually laughed once under his breath. Not because it was funny, because the audacity had surpassed ordinary reaction. Then my sister entered like accelerant. Unbelievable. She wrote, "You picked tonight of all nights to sabotage something important." A second message followed before I could process the first. "Do you have any idea what was at stake here?" I typed, "I know exactly what was at stake for me." Deleted it. I typed nothing. The restraint was beginning to feel like holding a live wire. The messages kept coming. Dad, families support each other when opportunities arise. Mom, we were going to celebrate you when you came home. Sister, not everything is about your degree. That one landed especially hard because it carried years of subtext inside it. Not everything is about you. Not everything is academic. Not everything has to be measured by credentials. My family had always found ways to recast my effort as vanity whenever it inconvenienced their preferred hierarchy of crisis. I should say I was prepared for anger. What I was not prepared for was the speed with which the courtroom widened. Someone had clearly started forwarding screenshots. My aunt messaged first, then an uncle. Then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. The family network woke up in layers, each person arriving already briefed enough to judge and underinformed enough to sound righteous. My phone buzzed so constantly I finally had to turn it face down between the water glass and the bread plate because the screen kept flashing against the white tablecloth. The themes repeated. You're being harsh. Your parents have sacrificed everything. A degree is wonderful, but relationships are real life. Try to see your sister's side, one aunt wrote. In a tone of syrupy reason, sweetheart, an MIT ceremony is prestigious. Yes, but investors and partnerships can affect a whole household. A whole household. I read that one twice because I needed to admire the architecture of the lie. My doctorate, apparently, was personal prestige. My sister's boyfriend's beverage pitch, however flimsy, was communal economics. One was vanity, the other was family duty. A cousin I barely knew wrote, "You always were ambitious. Don't let that make you arrogant." That did something ugly to my breathing. Because family systems know exactly where to press. They don't invent the wound. They use the one already there. The fear that maybe I was selfish after all. Maybe I did overvalue achievement because it had become my chosen language. Maybe I was elitist in ways I had worked hard not to become. Maybe normal people understood that relationships required flexibility and only I, with my schedules and institutions and formal ceremonies, kept mistaking symbolic moments for love. For 10 dangerous minutes, I almost let them have it. I almost reread my own message as if it had been too severe. I almost apologized for the reimbursement line. I almost sent some terrible compromise text that would reopen the door just enough for them to climb through and rearrange the facts. Then my phone buzzed with a private message from my cousin Lena, not in the group. Directly to me, "Are they seriously acting like this was last minute?" I sat up straighter. Lena was not especially close to me, but she was one of the few relatives who noticed things without performing wisdom about them. At family gatherings, she often sat on the edges with me, observing the room like a person reading a language others spoke too fluently. I typed back, "What do you mean?" 3 dots appeared. Stayed, vanished, returned. Then an image came through. A screenshot of a digital invitation. Not a text, not a casual mention. A designed invitation with graphics. Metallic gradient background. The beverage logo. Adrian and my sister smiling at the top like co-hosts of a gala. Launch day celebration. Join us for an exclusive first pour. Investor meet, tan greet, and brand reveal. Date, time, address. The date was 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. I stared at the timestamp at the bottom first because my mind refused the content. Sent to family and friends. Save the date, investor expected. Come support the future. 3 weeks earlier was before my father had said flights were being sorted. Before my mother asked about dress code with that warm, almost proud voice. Before they let me keep booking and printing and hoping as if travel were still a live plan. My throat went dry. Lena sent another message. "They sent this around ages ago. I assumed you knew and they were doing both somehow. Then I saw your text." For a second, the restaurant disappeared. Or rather, it stayed visible but lost meaning. The clink of cutlery, the candle on the table, the river outside the glass, all of it became distant because the story had just changed shape. This was no longer only about what they chose. It was about what they concealed while letting me prepare a public seat for them. Premeditation is a cold word, but that is how it felt. They had known, they had planned, they had smiled through logistics, they were already undermining. My mother had asked me if blue was too bright for a blouse when there was already a family invitation circulating for a backyard launch on the same day. My father had asked where to sit for the hooding after receiving an invitation to something else he apparently intended to prioritize. They had not been torn. They had kept me hopeful because hope was easier to manage than conflict. "Hey," Mina said quietly. I realized I was gripping the edge of the table hard enough for my knuckles to pale. I handed her the phone. She read the screenshot, looked up, and said one word. "Wow." Arjun leaned over next. His eyebrows went up so high they almost disappeared into his hairline. "That's not indecision," he said. No, it wasn't. That was the final clean thing. The thing I could not unknow even if every relative in the family called me arrogant until morning. Ambiguity had been theater. Delay had been strategy. The vague answers, the livestream questions, the "we'll know more tomorrow" lines. None of them described real uncertainty. They described concealment. Back in the group chat, the messages were still flying. "Dad, we did what any good parents would do." "Mom, you're punishing us for supporting your sister." "Sister, You have no idea how hard it is to build something real. I almost laughed at that last one. Build something real. As if my dissertation had been papier, MCH, but I didn't laugh. I forwarded the screenshot to myself first, then saved it to my phone. Then looked at the group chat again with the clarity so sharp it felt medicinal. They had not simply failed me. They had lied long enough to keep me available for disappointment. And now, with proof in my hand and the entire family trying to drag me back into the role of grateful, manageable child, the question was no longer whether they would apologize. It was whether I was still willing to help them pretend they had almost done the right thing. I sent this screenshot to the group chat without commentary first. Just the image, invitation header, launch day celebration, date, time, 3 weeks earlier. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The silence inside the thread felt different from the earlier pauses. Not confusion now, recognition. The kind that passes through a room when everyone has seen the same body hit the floor. Then my mother replied, "You don't understand the context." My sister followed immediately. That was just a preliminary invite. Then my father, "Stop sending things around like a lawyer." That line would have almost impressed me if I hadn't been so tired. Even exposed, they were still trying to reposition the problem, not the lie itself. My method, my tone, my forensic discourtesy. I looked at the 3 messages and felt something flatten inside me. Not rage. Rage still contains a plea. It says, "You should have been different." This felt colder, more finished. I typed slowly. "You knew for weeks. You let me pay for flights and hotel anyway. You let me believe until the ceremony that you were still deciding. Do not contact me again unless you are ready to tell the truth without excuses." I read it once, looking for softness I might have smuggled in unconsciously. There wasn't any. I added nothing else. No I love you, no take care, no when things calm down. Those are the ropes families like mine use to climb back onto your back before the bruises fade. I sent the message, watched it appear beneath the screenshot, and knew in the same second that the next choice would matter more than the words. Because boundaries inside a family are often treated as weather, something dramatic that passes if everybody waits long enough. I saved the entire thread. Every message, the original flight updates, my mother's cancellation, my father's text during the ceremony, the call log, the screenshot from Lena, the family's replies. I exported the chat, emailed it to myself, backed up the images to cloud storage, and took separate screenshots of the hotel confirmations and flight receipts. It was a strangely practical hour. My face still looked composed. My hands moved like someone preparing tax documents. But each saved file made the truth less vulnerable to revision. By the time dessert menus arrived, I had already decided I was not going home. Home had been in the plan as a strained aftermath. A delayed celebration, maybe. A quiet return. Some ugly version of swallowing the whole thing in person while my mother made tea and my father talked about moving forward and my sister pretended her feelings were the center of the room. The image now felt obscene. I opened the airline app under the table. My return flight was 2 days later. Enough time originally to see them collect the performance of family repair, and then come back east to start the next phase of my life. I clicked through the cancellation prompts while the server described a dessert special involving brown butter and strawberries. The normality of his voice made me feel almost dissociated. Canceled trip, confirmed. Travel credit issued. There it was. One practical severing, small compared to the rest, but real. I was not going back to stand inside their version of what had happened. Then I opened the email from the institute about my postdoc paperwork. The position was in the same metro area, not far from campus. I had been slow-walking housing because part of me still thought the summer might include extended family visits. A trip home, some attempt to stitch old and new life together. Now that hesitation looked childish. There was a building near the lab I'd been considering. Small 1-bedroom. Too expensive by any sane measure, but walkable. Stable, close enough that I could stop commuting my panic across temporary spits. I filled out the deposit form before I could start narrating the cost to myself. Bank routing. Confirmation number. Submit. The screen loaded, then refreshed with a receipt. Money I had once treated as emergency reserve was now becoming flooring. Keys, a mailbox, a place no one from my family had helped choose and therefore could not haunt by default. The shift felt unsentimental and huge. My life was moving one transaction at a time into a shape that did not require their cooperation. My phone buzzed with incoming calls while I did it. Mother? Decline. Father? Decline. Sister? Decline. Then an aunt. then another unknown number, then my mother again. The restaurant's candlelight shook slightly in the reflection of the screen as it kept lighting up. Mina watched all of this in silence. Arjun finally said, "If you answer, they'll drag you back into live debate." I know. I did know. That was what made the next part possible. I opened each contact one by one and blocked them. Mother, father, sister, then the aunts who had joined in, the uncle who sent that message about real-life relationship support, not every relative in existence. Just the ones already volunteering themselves as enforcers. Each block required one small tap and one confirmation. The interface was absurdly clean for something that felt so violent. "Are you sure you want to block this caller?" Yes, yes, yes. My chest tightened harder with every tap. But underneath the grief there was something else. Something almost shameful in how relieving it felt. The buzzing stopped. The screen stayed dark. No new indictments. No fresh evidence that I was selfish. No urgent summons back into my assigned role. Silence arrived all at once and sat down across from me. On the walk back from the restaurant, the river wind had sharpened. My gown was folded over my arm now, the hood tucked carefully inside so it wouldn't drag. The city looked cleaned by night. Windows lit, bridges strung with small beads of traffic. My phone remained quiet until an unknown number called just as we reached the hotel. I knew it was my mother before I answered and didn't answer. A voicemail appeared. I went upstairs alone, sat on the edge of the hotel bed meant for guests who had never come, and pressed play with the phone held away from my ear like I was handling something fragile and radioactive. "My child," she began, already crying. I stopped it there. Not because I was strong, because I knew the script too well. Tears first, family second. Injury third. But never the sentence I needed. Never we were wrong. Never we chose badly. Never we lied. Grief in my family had always been allowed. Accountability had not. I deleted the voicemail unheard after the first sentence. Then I blocked the unknown number too. That was the click, not the message, not the screenshot, not even the canceled flight, the block after the voicemail. Because that was the moment I stopped leaving the side door open for an apology that did not know how to exist in my family's language. I stopped negotiating with the fantasy that one honest conversation was always still available if I just stayed patient enough, gentle enough, impressive enough, injured in the right proportion. I set the phone on the nightstand and looked around the hotel room. The spare towels folded on the rack. The untouched second luggage stand. The printed itinerary still inside the clear folder, with every time slot and walking route lovingly arranged for people who had needed only one thing from me, that I keep believing them. I cried then. Finally. Not elegantly. Not for long. Just a low animal sound into my own hand, so no one in the hallway would hear. Because even when you choose self-respect, there is still the body, there is still the child in it, hearing all the old warnings at once, ungrateful, dramatic, cold, too much, too hard, too ambitious, too willing to make family conditional. Maybe I was making family conditional, but then theirs had always been conditional too. The condition was simply that I absorb harm quietly. That night, in a hotel room, paid for with hope and occupied by nobody but me, I crossed the point where the old version of my life could no longer be restored by a better explanation. Morning would come, the postdoc would begin. Leased documents would need signatures, boxes would have to be packed. There were practical things to do now, and they belonged to a future that no longer included waiting by my phone for permission to matter. Still, before I turned off the lamp, I looked once at the blocked contacts list just to make sure the names were really there. They were. And for the first time, the silence that followed did not feel like punishment. It felt irreversible. The first weeks after I blocked them felt less like freedom than like altitude sickness. Everything was technically fine. Better than fine, on paper. I had finished the PhD, the postdoc started on schedule. I moved into the apartment near campus with 2 suitcases, 3 boxers, a secondhand desk, and a mattress that arrived in plastic and expanded with a faint chemical smell while I ate takeout on the floor. My commute shrank to a walk. My key worked. My name was on the lease. If I wanted silence, there was silence. If I wanted the light on at 2 a.m. while I revised a draft, nobody called to ask why I sounded tired and then redirected the conversation to my sister. And still, the quiet was not kind at first. It had edges. It exposed things. I would come home after a full day in the lab, badge still clipped to my belt loop, and catch myself checking my phone for messages from numbers I had blocked. Not because I missed the actual people contacting me, because some old mechanism in me still expected family as background radiation. Disappointing, intrusive, destabilizing, but constant. Without that noise, the apartment could feel almost too honest. Refrigerator hum, footsteps upstairs, my own spoon against a bowl. I had spent so long calibrating myself against other people's volatility that calm itself felt suspicious. The postdoc helped because science is demanding in a way that can save you for a few hours at a time. The work was different now, less frantic proving, more careful building. I had my own desk, my own access, my own project boundaries. I still spent late nights in rooms lit by monitors and machine indicators. I still drank terrible coffee from department urns and argued with code and squinted at data that refused to behave. But something had changed in me. When committee-style criticism came, it no longer hit the exact same wound. My work was not auditioning for my place in the family anymore. It was just work. Hard, absorbing, sometimes beautiful work. That distinction took time to feel real. So did the peace. The first month, I ate dinner standing up more nights than I want to admit. The second month, I bought a lamp I liked instead of the cheapest possible one and put a plant on the windowsill, then worried for 3 days that this was frivolous. The third month, I realized I had gone an entire Saturday without bracing for someone else's emergency. I went for a walk along the Charles and noticed the river instead of rehearsing imaginary arguments. The water was gray-blue, the wind cold, rowers slicing through in long, clean rhythms. I stood there with my hands in my pockets and felt something unfamiliar. Not happiness. Room. That was the first honest gift of distance. Room to have a life that wasn't organized around being interruptible. A few people asked, carefully, whether I had heard from my family. Mina asked the least dangerously. We were in the lab kitchen one evening while the microwave revolved a sad container of leftovers. Any movement, she said. Blocked numbers stay blocked. I told her. She nodded once. Good. Arjun, on the other hand, asked like an economist reviewing a failed merger. Any restitution? I almost laughed. No reimbursement, no apology, no. He stirred sugar into his coffee and said, then at least they're being consistent. That became its own strange comfort, not their cruelty. The clarity, with enough time, I stopped waiting for a message that would reverse the meaning of what happened. No family council appeared. No relative reached out with the rare miracle of honesty. The pressure campaign lost steam once there was no audience left to manage. I heard bits and pieces through people adjacent to the family. My sister and Adrian were already wobbling by the end of summer. The investor had not changed their lives. The brand still existed online, posting glossy photos to an account with more aspiration than traction. None of that brought satisfaction. Mostly it brought the exhausted recognition of a pattern continuing without me. Then, in October, a package arrived. No return name on the label. Just my address in handwriting. I recognized before I let myself admit I recognized it. My father's block capitals. Slight right slant. Deliberate pressure on the downstrokes. I carried the box inside and left it on the kitchen counter for an hour before opening it. The cardboard was cheap and slightly crushed at one corner. Inside, wrapped in nothing, were the printed pieces of the weekend I had built for them. The clear folder. The color-coded itinerary. The campus map with circles around guest seating and photo spots. The dinner reservation printout. Even the little note about bringing a jacket for the river. The paper smelled faintly stale, like a drawer closed all summer. At the bottom sat one envelope. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. We did what we thought was best for the family. It read, "We hope time will help you see that. Your mother misses you. We never wanted things to go this far." No signature at first glance, though the shape of the writing made it obvious. Then, lower down, just Dad. I read it standing up under the kitchen light. Then I sat, then I read it again. Not because the note was complicated, because it was so simple, it finally removed the last excuse I had left hidden for them. We did what we thought was best for the family. There it was. Not regret, not misunderstanding. Not even a defense of the startup party itself. A creed, a system. The family, as they defined it, had never actually operated on the principle of fairness or truth or showing up for the person who had earned the moment. It operated on preserving the current story, protect the volatile center, reward the most disruptive need, keep the peace where peace means the least powerful person absorbs the damage and calls it maturity. I had spent years trying to become undeniable inside that structure, but being undeniable was never the point. They did not fail to choose me because I had not achieved enough. By graduation day, I had achieved more than enough to satisfy any reasonable standard. They failed to choose me because choosing me would have disrupted the family arrangement that relied on me not requiring that choice. I folded the note back along the same crease lines and sat there with one hand on the itinerary, looking at my own little notes in the margins. Good photo spot here, family seating opens early. That sentence almost hurt more now than the note did. Not because it was naive, because it was tender. It showed how much care I had still been willing to offer, right up to the edge of the truth. I did not call, I did not write back. Instead, a few days later, I opened the graduation photos on my laptop. There were good ones. Better than good, me and Mina laughing with the dome behind us. My advisor shaking my hand. One formal portrait in regalia that looked exactly like the kind of image families frame for living rooms and send to everyone they know. For a while I thought I should print one of those. Make the day visible in the normal way. Let the event keep the dignity it deserved. But I kept returning to a different image. I hadn't even taken it on purpose. Not really. One of the lab mates had snapped a few wide photos before the ceremony started. And in one frame you could see the aisle, the rows of guests, and those 2 seats near the front still empty. Paper programs resting on them like placeholders for a promise that never intended to arrive. The photograph was plain, no dramatic lighting, no tears, no villain in frame. Just absence arranged neatly in public. I printed that one. The frame I bought was simple black wood. Nothing elaborate. I put it on the bookshelf beside a stack of papers and a ceramic mug full of pens. Anyone else might have thought it was a strange choice. Why frame the empty seats instead of the triumph? Why keep the wound visible? Because that image had finally taught me something I had not been able to learn from praise, or prizes, or titles, or the letters after my name. It taught me the difference between being impressive and being loved. Impressive had carried me a long way. Across oceans, through visas and stipends and committee politics and clean room shifts and midnight simulations and one impossible defense after another. Impressive built the degree. It built the career. It built the apartment, the postdoc, the quiet life that slowly became a real one. But love, real love, does not stand outside your milestone weighing whether another person's chaos feels more urgent. It does not keep you hopeful while making other plans. It does not ask you to become easier to abandon. So when people ask me now whether my family ever made it right, I don't give them the version with suspense in it. No, I say, and then, if they're close enough to deserve more, I tell them the stranger truth. The graduation was not the day I learned my family could fail me. I had known that in fragments for years. It was the day I stopped helping them turn that failure into something noble. That was the real hooting, not the velvet and ceremony. The crossing out of an old role. I had spent my whole life trying to be chosen through excellence. My graduation taught me to choose differently. If you've ever been the easy one, the dependable one, the one they assume will understand, don't confuse surviving neglect with deserving it. And if this hits something raw in you, stay with that. It might be the first honest thing your silence has said,